I have made some big changes in the way that I use Obsidian.
Give me a summary.
Longer notes.
Okay, a little more information.
Less Zettlekasten and more combining multiple concepts in longer notes.
Is that it?
Yep.
Then why the video?
Because the how and why I'm doing it will not only change the monthly research review that I do, but will also change the type of content that will be coming out on this channel, so I wanted to explain my thinking process behind the changes.
Let's hear it.
It all started when I tried to summarise a research paper. It was in my capture note folder with all the other capture notes that I had captured. Then I realised it could no longer be a capture note because I was actually summarising the note, making it a working note, not capturing note, so I needed to move it to a different folder.
Pause for a second. What's the difference?
Well, the capture notes are notes with the original sources and any sort of points that I wanted to capture or record so I could remember them later on.
And working notes?
Well, summarised notes, but we haven't quite got to that part of the story yet.
Okay, carry on.
So this research paper note needed to be in my working notes folder with all the other Zettels, concept notes and evergreen notes, but they were shorter notes and this research paper note was quite long, so it didn't really fit. To avoid the research paper feeling a little bit left out, I decided to make a summary folder for it to belong.
And did it belong?
No, not really, because the note was still being processed as a capture note and being taken apart, used in other working notes.
So it was still like a capture note?
Exactly. It didn't have a folder that it fit in.
Did you give it some tags?
Yeah, but that didn't really solve the issue, because the notes were still being separated into other working notes, and the tags were just duplicated working notes because they were all concepts, which actually confused the issue.
But how is that confusing?
Well, each point was related to a concept, which was a working note, and those working notes were also the tags that I was using, so I had duplicated concepts for tags and working notes.
I see, and pulling the note apart wasn't good?
It was for developing a deeper understanding of the specific concepts, but it didn't really help the wider implications that it had for actions and thoughts.
What did you do?
I kept the research note in the capture folder and actually changed how my working notes worked.
What? How does that even solve the problem?
Well, the issue wasn't categorizing the notes. It was actually what the categorization meant I was going to do with the notes.
That doesn't make sense.
Working notes were short, densely, explicitly linked notes about a specific concept.
Right.
And the specific concepts were often linked to the same longer note.
Maps of content?
No, because the pages were more than links, more than lists of concepts, more than shallow explanations of an idea. They were deep integrations of conceptual mindsets that formed a narrative or a story that could be told.
But with links?
With lots of capture notes for references. But most of the concepts brought up in the story were not discrete concepts separate from the narrative. They were part of the narrative, a whole conceptual story.
So where do you keep the concepts?
Inside the whole story.
But they can apply to other stories.
Yes, they can, with a different interaction in each narrative or story.
So you write the same thing in each story?
But it's not the same thing, because it will change dependent on the constraints and affordances the story or narrative gives the concept.
But doesn't that make the concept harder to find when you need to add a reference, or when you want to add a reference?
Well, it is actually easier because a lot of the references had a context they were being shared in, and my working notes didn't have a context. So I either had to add a sentence in the working note to bring in some context, or I needed to add the reference into a different page for that narrative, that story, that context of that concept.
So you're reducing the amount of notes you have, but you're actually gaining clarity in the concepts and narratives you're talking about.
Exactly, and using footnote references to help me understand and navigate around how the concepts are actually being used in the narrative or story.
And what does that change to your normal process?
Each piece of information is now not attached to various discrete concept working notes, but attached to context-specific conceptual applications of the information in a narrative which guides action.
That was just a lot of big words.
Information from videos, podcasts, blogs, articles are now being pulled apart, and instead of being generalized and put with a concept, it is put into a narrative around action that I can either apply to my behaviors or apply to my fundamental thinking around a topic.
Okay.
Some reflective thoughts during this process is actually the content I was sharing were discrete concepts that lacked a lot of context and conceptual stories. Prior knowledge of the consumer was assumed, so misconceptions, bias, depth of understanding was assumed, so my level of communication, my type of communication, my style of communication may have actually reinforced misconceptions rather than helping to challenge conceptual change or conceptual consolidation. Also, because of the discrete, specific and selective way my working notes were written, a lot of the stories and context were actually being left out in the content I was making, which actually reduced the amount of nuance I could apply. That actually unintentionally separated people from the concepts I was talking about because they couldn't relate or understand without the nuance involved.
So although the reduced nuance made them shorter and more direct, it actually made them harder to get, harder to use?
Essentially, and the worst part about this is, one of the biggest irritations I have with other people's content, apart from them not referencing science, is when they give generalized advice without nuance or context and thinking about the individual differences each person has, and I was doing that exact same thing.
But we can't account for all individual differences. There's way too many.
No, we can't. But we can talk about stories or narratives around a framework, theory, philosophy to guide people, to help them apply whatever it is in their own context because they know their context better than us.
So longer notes for more deeper understanding, which allows more nuance in discussions.
Yes, giving people a narrative or story that gives people tools that they can use and apply themselves, rather than giving discrete, implicitly implied correct conceptual advice. For those of you that watched the video earlier in the week that's now unlisted and was deleted, this is essentially the official video of me moving away from Zettlekasten and towards more longer notes, and how this actually impacts the videos is the videos may be not necessarily longer in length, but much longer in depth, potentially increasing cognitive load, something that I actually shared in the video. I've literally just edited it, which is why I'm in a different t-shirt. But if you did reach this part of the video, then you're the people I actually want to hear feedback from in the comment section about things you like, dislike, whether the lighting's bad, the audio's bad, whatever, because you actually listen to the video rather than take the first minute and then ask a question that I've actually already answered, calling the people out that have already left the video. So yeah, it'd be great to get your feedback in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.